We next want to move into some of our panel discussion. Very important that part of the ideas and actions that Daniel and Peter have been talking about are what we want to learn about in the next couple of panels. Our first panel is really empowering Indigenous youth for climate action, the why and how. And I'm very pleased if we can move to the next slide to introduce Coral Avery, who's one of our shining stars in the Pacific Northwest. The four panelists will be talking about efforts for empowering youth in diverse array of communities, both at the urban native level, the tribal level, community-based programs, as well as international perspectives. So we're very pleased, Coral, that you could join us and moderate this panel. Coral's been a key part of our affiliate tribes of Northwest Indians and Northwest Climate Adaptation Science Center team. She's been one of our leads for planning this very important youth summit. She's an enrolled citizen of the Shawnee tribe and a recent graduate of Oregon State University. Go Beavers. We saw you guys playing basketball the other day. And she's also part of our BIA Pathways program. And so we're very pleased and honored, Coral, you could moderate this very important session. Thanks so much for being here. I'll turn it over to you.
Niawe, thank you so much, Don. It's great to be here, and thank you everybody for being here today. Hawesi Wapani, or good morning, or good afternoon, depending on where you are. We have a very exciting panel today coming up now with speakers involved in areas from community to tribal, urban native, and international programs. In a moment, I'll introduce each speaker and then invite each person to share about their work. After everybody has shared, we'll have a roundtable discussion and invite all of our attendees to put any questions you may have in the chat during these presentations. That way we can read them out and make sure that it's much more conversational. So please be sure to participate in that way. And panelists, welcome. I'm honored to be moderating a panel of such dedicated people and look forward to learning about what you all do alongside our attendees. I'm honored to introduce Roberto Barrero from the Taino Tribal Nation, who will be sharing about urban native programs. Roberto will discuss the role of youth and cultural revitalization in urban native communities. Next, we'll have Mike Durgalo from the Confederated Salish Kootenai Tribes, who will share about the environmental advocates for global and local ecological sustainability, or the EAGLES program. Welcome, Mike. We also have Rebecca Descombs in Yupiat, and please correct me if I pronounce any of these names wrong. Rebecca is from the Native American Youth and Family Center, or NAYA, and we'll be sharing about community-based programs. And lastly, we will have Chris, Hanani, who is Hopi and Diné, and we'll be sharing about the International Indian Treaty Council. So excited to have all of you here today. Welcome. And now I'll turn it over to Roberto to start.
Well, it looks like Roberto may not be on.
All right. Well, I see Chris is here, so why don't we start with Christopher?
Hi, hello everybody. Lomat lang ba yat bene. She Chris Honani nishle kazaflan nishle. Iswong wa pashish chin pa kabunga tashiche aro tawo wa tashinale. Tonenes de denasha. Ne Chris Honani yan pan maatse wa ne lamoke ba yan hopi maatse wa ne kazaflane de viet kita. Good morning, good day, good evening to wherever you may be. My name is Chris Honani. My Hopi name is Lomakuiva. I am of the Many Goats clan. I am born for the Hopi Coyote clan, and I am originally from Tuba City, Arizona, but currently I live in Tucson, Arizona, the ancestral homelands of the Tanahatam people. I'm also the administrative and programs assistant for the International Indian Treaty Council, and I have been involved with IITC for about 2 years now. I'm the youngest staff person working with the Treaty Council. It has been definitely been a learning experience for me since working for the Treaty Council. As you can see behind me, my background there is actually my family's cornfield up on the Hopi Reservation. And that's where I learned a lot of the tools and knowledge that allowed me to become a leader, or at least a youth leader on the international level when it comes to talking about climate change and other similar issues. And so I have to give a lot of credit to my family for teaching me these important values in how to be a Hopi and how to be a Dene person, young man. And when I was growing up, I was taught to grow corn. I was taught how to grow it and why it's important to grow it and why it's important to save seeds, because for many different reasons, seeds hold the key to our future, and also it teaches us a lot about our past as well. And so today, what I want to talk about, and I know I have very few minutes, is the international perspective on climate action and how more young Indigenous people can become engaged in this work. So before I worked for the Treaty Council, I was working on a farm. I was tasked with growing nursery starts, plant starts in our nursery, and doing other tasks on the farm. And one day I had a friend who was actually working for the Treaty Council one day. Actually, she's going to be providing the closing remarks, I believe, Amy Wan. She was actually already involved with the Treaty Council at the time, and she was invited to participate in the 2019 Indigenous Peoples Corn Conference in Tlaxcala, Mexico, which is a conference that's held about every 4 years or so, and it's hosted by the International Indian Treaty Council and other affiliates. And so she wasn't able to go, so she gave me her ticket and said, you know, I know you're a corn farmer, so go down there and learn about other people's methods of growing corn. And so I thought, why not? I had my passport at the time. And so I said, sure, just a couple weeks notice. And I took the ticket and went to Mexico. And that's where I actually had met Andrea Carmen, who is the executive director of the International Indian Treaty Council. And if you know me on a personal level, you'll know that I'm not the most outspoken person. I'm pretty introverted. I tend to like to be out in the field doing my own thing by myself, but I couldn't pass up an opportunity to learn from other Indigenous peoples, especially outside of the US. And so so when I went down there, met Andrea Carmen, and by my presentation of me growing up as a young corn farmer, that kind of led me to talking to her, and eventually she offered me a job with the Treaty Council, based on what I was saying about corn and how it's important for us as Indigenous peoples to protect this thing. So what I would really encourage for youth is to travel, get out of the house when things are safe again. I know right now is not the easiest time to be doing stuff like this, but when things are safe again, to travel and to go out and explore new areas, I highly encourage other youth, Indigenous youth especially, to do these things, because it will lead you to many different places and it will lead you to many different people. From that first trip when I went down to Mexico, a few months later, I was invited to go to Bonn, Germany, to participate in the Global Landscapes Forum. And I just went there just to participate as a youth, but they offered me a position to be the MC of the whole event. And I was like, I had never been an MC before for any sort of event, but I said, why not? You know, hopefully something good will come out of it. And sure enough, it did. After that event, I was invited to, actually I applied to participate in the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, Land Degradation, and Drought in New Delhi, India, at the end of, in the fall of 2019. And I believe at that convention, that was the first time there was an actual youth caucus at that convention, and I had the opportunity to be a part of it. Not only was I a part of that first caucus, but I actually was the only North American indigenous youth to actually participate in that event. And you know, as proud as I am to say that, I really wish there was more involvement from other indigenous youth. And I think that for me participating in that event, I had no experience whatsoever before that in participating in such a huge international event. But I really would have felt a lot more comfortable and open to providing my perspective if I had other indigenous youth there with me at the time. I did present an intervention at that time, talked about why it's important to remember indigenous youth when we're combating desertification. And I'm from Arizona, and so if you know, we're facing a long-term drought, and that's an ongoing issue, and it's something that we have to adapt to. And so after that event, I came back home and really thought about it, and really thought about how can I help to get more indigenous youth into spaces like that, international policy-making bodies. And for one thing, I know for a fact that I was never taught about these things in public schools on the reservation. I grew up, like I said, in Tuba City, Arizona, and there was never any mention of the UN and what its function is and how we can be involved in that area. There was no real introduction into how we can become involved internationally. And so I started to think about, well, what sort of programs or workshops can I help to develop that will allow for more indigenous youth to become involved in these programs? And so one of the things that I have helped to organize is a weekly webinar series hosted by the International Indian Treaty Council. And I've been lucky enough to be one of the main people to organize these weekly webinars, get in touch with indigenous knowledge holders and experts from around the world, and to ask if they're willing to share their knowledge with a larger global audience. You know, we don't want to limit our network just to the US, to North America. We need to expand. We have other indigenous brothers and sisters across the world, and it's time for us to reconnect with them. I think in today's world, I think we're seeing more of a push from indigenous youth, from just youth in general, to connect globally, to share ideas globally, to break out of this box that we've been stuck in for many years, and to share our knowledge. And so that's the purpose of this webinar series that I've been a part of. And so I encourage all indigenous youth to participate in this webinar series. It's in English and Spanish. I'll provide the link in the chat. We have our final webinar on Friday, but we also have 2 traditional food gatherings, virtual gatherings, coming up in the next 2 months. One on tepary beans, which are a staple food of many Southwestern indigenous peoples, and also one on corn. It's called the 2021 Pueblo to Pueblo initiative. It's a corn summit, and we're inviting corn growers, corn farmers from wherever you may be growing corn to participate in this online gathering to share ideas and to talk about corn, talk about, remind ourselves why it's important to protect these things. And so with that, I think I might be done up on my time, but I will be around for questions. And I thank everybody that has been involved in putting this program together. Thank you. It's very valuable to me as a young person to learn from everybody else. So, kokwa, thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. We really appreciate you here to share, and definitely include the links in the chat so everybody is able to attend those wonderful events and webinars. Next, we'll move on to Mike Durgalo to speak on the Eagles program. Again, for the sake of time, so we have opportunity for discussion at the end. Be sure to keep it as brief as possible, but we're really excited to hear now about the Eagles program and Mike's work.
Thanks, Chris. That was awesome. And I was just wondering if Don was going to share any of that sandwich, but it looks like he's done with it already. Good morning. My name is Mike Durgalo, and I'm the director of the Tribal Historic Preservation Department here at the Confederated Salish Kootenai Tribes in Northwest Montana. And I'm also the chairman of the Climate Change Advisory Committee. And you can go on to the next slide. So we were one of the first tribes in the United States to develop a climate change strategic plan. That whole planning process we started that in 2012. We finished the process in 2013, and in 2015, my brother Jim and I had this idea that we wanted to do exactly what Chris is talking about, empowering youth, engaging youth in what we're doing on the reservation as far as climate and climate impacts. So the Environmental Advocates for Global and Local Ecological Sustainability is something that my brother and Jim came up with. The whole idea behind that, next slide, was to empower the youth. One of the things I wanted to do, and the whole thing started with the BIA Youth Initiative grant. I did not want to go to the schools or tell the youth, this is what we want you to do. I wanted to go to them and say, what I did say is that, hey, I have some ideas and I have some money. So what would you guys like to do? One of those things was recycling. So that brochure could be available, it could be in a chat box or whatever, or somebody could put in there. I sent it earlier. We started out in, I believe, 7 schools on a reservation. And just like what Dan Wildcat said earlier, it was an effort to engage students from K through 12 and beyond, actually. We started out with some contests. I gave the kids, I bought a few iPads, and they had a poster contest, and they all came up with their own poster, and these went on t-shirts for the kids that were engaged in the Eagles program. They also did some community gardens. Next slide. Oh, this is a couple of the shirts and the posters that the schools came up with. Next slide, please. That's Arlie. Next slide. So one of the projects that the St. Ignatius or the Mission School did is called the Mission School Farm Wall Project. And we actually built a hydroponic garden in the elementary school of Mission School. And the kids helped. Next slide. The kids were, there you go. The kids were very much involved in the project, and they started growing different types of vegetables, which were actually used in the lunches that the school provided provided for the kids. I think it was a year later or so when we built another hydroponic garden in the middle school, one of the classrooms in the middle school of the mission school. On the next slide, there's some of the vegetables that are grown in the garden. And they actually tried different colors of lights to see how it would affect the plants. Next slide. The high school advanced biology class were growing basil, and actually they were marketing that in Missoula at a restaurant and just for local folks. We wanted to start an aquaponic garden in the hot spring school. We bought all the equipment, but the teacher did not get rehired the next year. So we're working to get that aquaponic garden going. Next slide. So one of the big things that all of the schools, I think all the schools participate in, is what's called Montana Smart Schools Challenge.
From the governor's office.
And I really apologize. I mean, these slides are kind of bland. They're not a whole bunch of nice background like Chris has behind him with the corn and all that stuff. The Montana Department of Environmental Quality has this program and the winners actually get a check for $1,000 from the governor when they win. So as you can see, we started the Eagles program, like I said, back in like 2015. The next year, Arlee won the Green Challenge, Arlee School, Joint School District, and every year since then, we've had schools on the reservation that have won that Smart Schools Challenge. I think that is my last slide, Coral. Thank you very much, and I appreciate everything. Honored to be here. Yeah, it's on here. Honored to be here and asked to provide and speak. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you so much, Mike. It's always wonderful to see you and wonderful to hear you speak about your amazing program. Really quickly before moving on to Rebecca, can I ask you, Mike, what inspired you to start the program?
It was an idea that we wanted to get the kids more involved and engaged in the whole process, because when we were developing our climate change strategy, it was all internal and it was all adults. So we wanted, we said, let's get the kids, and they're our future. We always say that, like Dan said, next 7 generations, they are our future. So let's get them more engaged.
Wonderful, thank you. And next, I'll go over to Rebecca to speak about NIA and community-based programs. Rebecca.
Hi, thank you, Coral. My name is Rebecca Descombe. I am Inupiat, originally from Utqiagvik and Unalakleet, Alaska. And I've been living in the Portland metro area for about 11 years now. I work as the Health and Environment Policy Coordinator with the Native American Youth and Family Center, NAYA, and have been working with NAYA since 2018. I'm so excited to be here with you, and thank you for the opportunity for me to share a little bit about my work and NAYA's work in Portland, empowering youth. In my current role, I have been able to help advocate for NAYA's legislative agenda that pertains to health and environmental justice issues, and sitting at tables that help write and create policy, making sure that the Native American Alaska Native community is always included in the language, especially when it comes to community investments. One of the favorite things that I do for work is providing opportunities for youth to participate in environmental justice leadership programs. The Environmental Justice Leadership Institute, which is hosted by a partner organization, is in its 2nd training session, and the youth who have signed up are receiving stipends for their participation. They're learning how to advocate for environmental justice bills, like learning how to use their voice to write testimony that will help improve the environment and address climate change at the legislative level. Next slide, please. I'm not only an employee of NAEA, but I'm also a parent of a student that attends Many Nations Academy, or M&A. M&A is an alternative high school that serves youth from 9th through 12th grade in a culturally relevant, student-centered learning environment. The best way that my child helps me describe M&A is they have smaller class sizes with more time for one-on-one instruction, better recovery options centered around flexibility and the ability to practice and learn Native traditions in an educational setting. M&A has some unique electives that are offered to students, such as cooking, regalia making, the Two-Spirit Club, and a new one called the Portland Youth and Elders Student Credit that teaches a student about engagement and advocacy work within the urban Native community, focusing on issues that are important to youth. So at M&A, my child is learning in an environment that is structured around her and her needs, and it is so important to the staff and teachers at M&A that they are meeting the students where they are, addressing the whole student, not just academically, but emotionally, mentally, and physically. And this brings me to the use of the relational worldview model. There you can see on this slide of the big circle there. It's a way of seeing the world and realizing that everyone is interconnected or circular. In other words, the model emphasizes the need for balancing among the 4 areas of life: mind, spirit, body, and social context. NAEA's diverse programming, from cultural nights, Two-Spirit Alliance, athletics, gang outreach, and intervention to the Oregon Lead program, all contribute to learning how to balance these 4 areas. Through this innovative approach, M&A students and NAEA's youth and families find success. Next slide, please. Let me drop this in the chat really quick. The Youth and Education Services Department is the largest and the founding department of NAEA and has provided students from grade school to the age of 24 since its founding. NAEA's mission is to enhance the diverse strengths of our youth and families in partnership with the community through cultural identity and education. The YES Department's programming provides the Native American Alaska Native community a place to gather and provide a safe space for youth to be able to express their cultural and traditional identities. The YES Department's programming highlights youth in order for them to reach their full potential, both academically and socially. Some of the services offered with the YES Department are, and I did drop the link for the events calendar if people are wanting to learn more about these pictures that I have on the slide. But the YES Department programming and services are their College and Career Center that offers career guidance and post-secondary education. My daughter has spent all of her senior year working with the College and Career Center, and they helped her with her application to Portland State University. And in February, she was accepted to PSU's Criminology and Criminal Justice program. They're currently helping her fill out scholarship applications and apply for college housing. The Cultural Arts program has been providing youth opportunities to learn about our diverse cultures and traditions, including instruction in traditional and community food gardens. These are all done on Zoom right now. My favorite so far has been Cooking with NAEA classes, where all participants learn how to cook and make traditional foods, from bison stew to elderberry syrup. The Learning Center staff also provide after-school sports activities for all age group and tutoring for student success. My daughter has benefited and enjoyed having a youth advocate throughout her high school years. Youth advocates work with youth and their families to address life issues, homework assistance, and connecting them to community resources that can benefit the entire family. One of the reasons why parents and community members created NAYA was to prevent gang membership. NAYA's gang outreach and prevention advocates meet youth out in the community to engage with them, offer positive choices, and it has shown to increase school attendance and enjoy healthier peer and family relationships. One last group I'll talk about is the Youth Development Advocates, such an important program. The Youth Development Advocates serve youth that are experiencing housing instability or houselessness. The youth are able to identify and pursue their goals to stabilization, whether it is achieving educational goals in high school and higher education, or just job placement and retention. Yay, the last slide, please. You've heard me speak about M&A and the YES department's amazing programming, and I want to put it together. I wanted to see if folks, I wanted to give folks a chance to think about like 5 skills a leader should have. Just think about them in your mind. When I did some research, because I wanted to find out what were the most important skills to learn in leadership development. And what I learned was communication skills, motivation and inspiration, decision-making, and someone who knows how to be responsible and accept responsibility were on the top of that list. One of the most amazing things I've been able to witness in my own child's success and how she became a leader. She learned how to communicate and advocate for her needs and others. She is motivated. She has inspired, and she has been inspired and is now inspiring others by sharing her story and her successes. She has learned to be responsible and accept responsibility, and most importantly, decision-making skills. Even though she needs to improve on it, like choosing between chips or a salad, she still makes a lot of bigger decisions that I'm proud of. So through all of the programming that she's participated in at NAYA, they have all contributed to her leadership development skills. Beyond high school, NAYA does offer adults 18 on up to participate in the Oregon Lead program that helps participants see themselves as leaders in their communities. That is it for me. And one last thing that I will say is never underestimate your voice and your story.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Rebecca. Great. And it looks like Roberto may not be here. Or has Roberto been able to join? Nope. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move into the roundtable discussion now. Thank you, all 3 of you, so much. And Rebecca, it sounds like really amazing opportunities and path for your daughter. So congratulations on to her and to you as well for all of that hard work. We invite everybody once again to put any questions you have for any of our speakers in the chat so that we can read them out. I'm going to go ahead and start from the top. We have quite a few questions for Chris, and we only have time for a few questions total. But I'll go ahead and start with this question from Sarah Voska. Chris, how can we build a foundation for Indigenous youth to engage on a local and global level with other Indigenous youth? And she also suggested that might be education, financial support, mentorship, but where do you see that happening?
I actually see that happening through the creation of um, a, a Congress of indigenous youth in the U.S. Um, an indigenous Congress, youth Congress, where we can be able to invite youth from different indigenous communities in North America to come together to share what is going on in their communities and what we can do as indigenous youth to have our voices be heard. I was working on a grant proposal in which we are working to establish uh, a Congress for Indigenous and Black youth in the US, creating a space for Indigenous youth and Black youth to come together to share their similarities and to share what knowledge we have to be able to help combat climate change and any of those other issues. And so I think to build a foundation like that, we're gonna need to create a space where we're able to invite our elders to also share their perspective and knowledge with us, because that's where I built my foundation, was from my elders. I asked my elders for their knowledge and to learn from them, and that's how I built my foundation personally. So if there's a way to create a space where we're able to do that with a wider audience, I think that would be one of the best ways to build that foundation.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Thank you, Chris. Next, we have a question from Paul Williams, and this is for everybody. So if you'd like to answer individually, you're more than welcome. We have enough time for everybody to share. So first, he wanted to explain, and I do want to read out this little paragraph that he typed, but he said there are many opportunities emerging as the environment and climate changes and new technologies are developed and implemented to address those changes. But those opportunities are often mistaken by those who are privileged by being well connected. Mentorships can change that, but the pandemic stopped those personal connections. So Paul's question to all of you is, do you believe that remote mentorships work? Remote mentorships would allow youth in any location with internet connection to connect with mentors in any profession in any part of the world. So do you believe that it would work, and have you seen that, or do you already use that in your organization?
I can answer that real quick. Yeah, so I actually was a mentor for a program at the University of Arizona called Native SOAR. And that is a program in which we were assigned to mentor high school students, Native high school students in the Tucson area. And I am a firm believer in mentorship. I am actually the oldest of three boys, and actually the oldest of all my other cousins as well. So I kind of have that experience of being a mentor. And I really wish that I had that same opportunity growing up. And I think mentorship is something that all of us need. And I think it just depends on the person, on how they take that mentorship. Some people are more hands-on, and they need to be directly engaged with the person physically. But I think as of right now, this is kind of our only option, but I think it's a way to at least begin the mentorship process, because mentorship doesn't just last for a year or for a day or a month. It's a lifelong thing. And so I I really believe that mentorship remotely right now can work, especially since youth are more inclined to use Zoom and other online platforms to share with each other. So I think today it would work a lot more than it would have worked, say, maybe 10, 20 years ago. So I think we have better opportunities in the future to be able to do that.
I totally agree with Chris's comment and answer. I really think that mentorships would work, and I feel like that they would work a lot better working in a Zoom platform or Google Meets or whatever platform that folks have been using have opened up opportunities for kids to participate because they're no longer trying to find a way to get to the location to be there in person. So the web online access, being able to be online with the mentorships and which is mentors in general is really opened up the our way how we can reach out to students and youth. One of the things that one of the reasons why I dropped the calendar into the chat earlier was all the events that NEA is still having for youth that connect with youth online and making sure that they can still have that social aspect. And it's such an important thing, especially when we need some kind of, interaction with people, that all the events are free and open to students. And if you're signing up for something with NEA, they provide all the materials. So they'll drop off everything that you need to be able to participate. And I think that's something that with the mentorship can also do when you're online.
Most definitely.
We still have a little time, Coral?
We have plenty of time, yeah. Mike, what are your thoughts on it?
Well, I think that whether you know it or not, you are all mentors, good or bad. And, one of the things that Rebecca and Chris mentioned, I think, it's Google and Zoom, and we're all learning how to do that. As older folks are learning, but, the younger people are constantly on Facebook and Twitter and everything else. So, you are mentoring somebody, being on social media. And that's, I always see things, about bullying and all that, but, we are all mentors. And that was one of the things that we really tried to emphasize with the Eagles program, was to put the high school kids with the middle school kids, so they'd be mentoring the middle school kids. The middle school kids would be working with the grade school kids, so they'd be mentoring them. And then once they graduated from high school, then they'd go on to college. And so you would actually know somebody going into college that was part of the Eagles program, and you could keep that going. So yeah, absolutely. Using social media and, the new technology is probably the thing of the future now. I mean, even if COVID does, I always hope we don't go back to a normal the way it was before. I hope it's a new normal, and we learn from this and we take advantage of it. I mean, just like earlier, we got to see Dan eating his sandwich. Sometimes we get to see your family members or your animals, and so and then you've seen the reduction in the overall CO2 levels of the whole earth when everybody had to stay home with the virus. So yeah, thanks, Coral.
Yeah, and I appreciate you mentioning the youth to youth mentorship as well. That's been very valuable for me in my life too. And I'll mention, because this will be relevant later in the event, but I'm a Bureau of Indian Affairs Pathways intern, and the Pathways program for me starting last June, after COVID had already spread and caused some lockdowns, my program has been entirely virtual as well. And I've had a lot of opportunity through my work with BIA and AT&I to meet a lot of wonderful people like everyone here today. And it's still very gratifying work. So I am a big advocate for that as well. Thank you for that question, Paul. Next, we have a question from Chaz Jones. This one is also to Chris of what international organizations or groups are available for Indigenous youth from the US to get involved with?
For youth in the US, I would recommend directly the International Indian Treaty Council, mainly because we are a group that has affiliates in several different regions: North America, South America, the Arctic, the Caribbean, and the Pacific. And I think that's probably one of the best ways to kind of get your foot into the door with these international programs. I really, at least from my perspective, I wouldn't really recommend jumping into the deep end like what I did. I went to the UN CCD COP14 without knowing anything about the UN or how it works or what you're supposed to do there. But the International Indian Treaty Council provides you with the knowledge and the tools to learn how to engage in these bodies, these UN bodies. Our executive director, Andrea Carmen, she sometimes does a workshop where she talks about engagement of Indigenous peoples in the UN at all different levels. And I think that's, you definitely need an introduction to be able to become engaged in these projects. And I hope to become a mentor in that area as well. I would love to host a webinar or do some sort of workshops where I can invite other Indigenous youth to learn about what international organizations and bodies are out there for us to engage in. There's a lot, and I can't name all of them for you, but I would highly recommend becoming involved with the International Indian Treaty Council, www.iitc.org.
Yeah, and I'll put the links to each of your organizations in the chat one more time at the end of this discussion as well, so folks can make sure to make note of those and look more into your organizations after this event. We have another question for everybody, but before that, I'm going to ask Rebecca. I know that you have a lot of personal foundation in your organization and working with your daughter, and it can be that also if you choose, but if that or other than that, what is the most gratifying part of this program for you in working with youth participants?
I want to say the wraparound services. It blows me away all the time to know like all the things that NEA does for, and goes above and beyond for youth and students. And like even as an employee, like I see the work that NEA is doing for families, for youth. The part of the organization that I work in is, surrounding policy work for nonprofits. So I get to see a lot of different areas through my students' eyes, through my eyes, and it's just blows me away all the time. NEA's different programming. I think I answered your question. I'm really sure.
Yeah, that was great. We also have a question from Dominica to everybody of how can we all work together to elevate Indigenous voices at all decision-making tables in these critical times?
Hey, Carol, can I just chime in on that last question a little bit?
Of course, yeah.
So one of the things we all know, when you do something amazing on a reservation, they name a road after you, or they name a building after you, or they name a street after you, or whatever. But my legacy that I thought that I would like to leave would be to have my great-great-grandchildren say, my papa was the one that started this Eagles program. And my dream was to make that program international. We wanted to start regional, or basically on the reservation at our home, and then go regional, and we'd have a regional Eagles Summit, and then we'd have a national Eagles Summit, and then we'd have an international Eagles Summit. We actually did start Skyping with the Samis. There were some Sami students in Norway and some students in New Zealand that were actually trying to get that back going.
Very cool. I'm excited to follow up and see where that goes on the international scale as well, Mike. And then I'll repeat that question for everyone. And Mike, if you'd actually like to answer this first, that would be great. But the question from Domenico is, how can we all work more together to elevate Indigenous voices at all decision-making tables in these critical times?
Well, I guess part of that is what I shared earlier as far as using social media and Zoom and just doing this type of thing right now. How many people are in this conference? Basically, I don't know if we had it in person, if there would be that many people, but reaching out and sharing that knowledge and sharing your programs with others, and join the Eagles.
So I know one of the things that I talked about earlier was one of NAEA's student credits we created the Portland Youth and Elder Council student credit, and the student that signs up for this is able to learn about advocacy and engagement work. So learning how to organize events around legislative agendas. I think the student that's working on this program right now is learning how to write testimony for a House Bill 2052 that is, it's for tribal regalia. So the students learning how to write testimony, learning how to reach out to their legislator, and how to get students more involved in that is just kind of just meeting them where they are. That means like just providing more education around how to get involved, and making it easier for them to connect, and making it easier for them to show up to volunteer work. And that goes along with the mentor question earlier, if it would work online. I feel like there is a lot more participation now than there was before with an online presence, and folks being able to have access from home instead of having to drive. One of the biggest challenges and barriers was getting our clients and participants to NAEA campus to participate in our programming, because not a lot of students have access to transportation. So going online really helped bridge some of that barriers for participation. And thank you, Dominique, for that question.
Yeah, Chris, did you want to respond to that question as well? And then Shannon will take your question right after.
Yeah, sorry. I think one of the ways that we can empower our voices and to be heard at the international level or any other level, I think one of the tools that we encourage a lot of Indigenous peoples to use is the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. That is a tool that has many different articles that affirm our rights as Indigenous peoples. And it's important for us to remind people that that is a tool that is something that we can use to advance our peoples and communities. What I wanted to actually read earlier was an article from that. In that article, 20, what was it? Article 29, which is, I'll read it really quick here. Indigenous peoples have the right to the conservation and protection of the environment and the productive capacity of their lands or territories and resources. States shall establish and implement assistance programs for Indigenous peoples for such conservation and protection without discrimination. And so using the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples will really allow us to affirm our voices and our rights in these international policy-making bodies. And so I encourage all Indigenous youth to read the whole declaration. You can find that at our website, and you can also just find it by Googling UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as well.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. And then Shannon, this will be our last question. Thank you for voicing it.
Okay, thank you, Coral, and thank you, everybody. My apologies. I was at a couple Zooms, as Mike had said, but it's really important for me to be here today. My name is Shannon Holsey. I'm the president of the Stockbridge Munsee community. We're located in Wisconsin. I also serve as the treasurer for the National Congress of American Indians, but what really piqued my interest when I got the notification really was I also sit on an appointed committee called the 30 by 30 that was instituted by a resolution to save nature. And it was a goal for the United States to protect and conserve at least 30% of the oceans and its lands by 2030. So this group is made up of basically tribal leaders and tribal organization leaders with regards to the threats of nature and the additional threats to our tribal nations. And how do we find resolution to continue to the safeguarding of all of those things that are critically important to us. And I'll apologize and I'll be very succinct, but one of the leaders said something very profound earlier, and it is, as we pause and we look back at the vulnerabilities of this past year, we talked about what do we resume as normal, but we also talked about the reprieve of what happened when we discontinued some of those things that we had done. And, I was just telling somebody the other day, I said, I wonder what LA looks like now. I haven't traveled in a while, but wonder what it looks like now that there is not so much activity and people aren't doing what they used to. But a part of that 30 by 30 policy, some of the core areas were the idea was planted by Secretary Haaland was to institute not only safeguarding the environment, but also instituting tribal cultural values and also strengthening the nation-to-nation relationship. And I heard Chris talk about it, not only tribal sovereignty, but self-determination and how we look at ourselves, both collectively in a unified way and even internationally. And I appreciate you bringing and facilitating that conversation around that important thing internationally in the relationship that we hold with our trustees. Some of the other initiatives were around sovereignty, representation, and resources. And I know the question was asked even in logging in, how do you bring that around different levels of or platforms of communication to envelop all interested parties, especially, I heard an interesting concept just recently. Somebody said, you always talk about the seven generations, but somebody said, no, I don't see it that way. I see it as 7 generations, but it's 3 forward, 1 existing, and 3 backwards. And it kind of profoundly resonated with me because I think that's absolutely true. And I think if we look at it probably more holistically or homogeneously that way, I think we can, with the assistance of, people like such as yourself on this panel and out there that have this interest, because I really do believe that it's going to take a current group of people to envelop future generations and create a pathway to establish some of that in terms of the critical path and the critical issues around climate change. And so one of the things that the tribal leaders recently discussed was around sort of that, how do you support and empower and educate, young people to become future leaders and tribal climate change adaptation and planning and enabling. And I think I appreciate the conversations that were had today, but I think it also was very poignant in that it was pointed out, like it's through mentorship, it's through uses, different platforms and uses of different mediums. But I also think that it is also about the development and delivery of that climate adaptation with people like yourself at the table, planning, assessing vulnerability assessments and monitoring, and then creating strategic plans and forums moving forward. Because this isn't something that's just granular. It's not something that's just we're going to come back now. It's the reason we're doing it now is because we see the erosions and the things that are happening. And we understand if we don't do something now and we don't have inclusiveness of the people that it's going to affect into the future, then we're in a lot of trouble. So I just wanted to say that I am going to bring forward the suggestion of the 30 by 30 group of tribal leadership, that there be an encompassment and inclusion of younger people on that group of think tank, because I think it's critically important. And I think it's also finally critically important to not just empower and call to action, but it's also critically important to make sure that we provide you the tools and resources to enable you to become those future ecologists, biologists, political, analytic people, and all the other things that are going to be critical to this endeavor. So I really thank you, Coral and the group for your call to action and allowing me a few minutes of your time today.
Of course, and thank you so much, Shannon, for everything you had to say just now. It was really, really valuable to add to the conversation. I appreciate you coming on to do that. If you have any other links that you'd like folks to check out to follow up on some of that information or some of the points that you made, definitely put them in the chat.
I will, Coral, and I'll send you our call to action so that everybody can see it. But then I will follow back with you to make sure that there is inclusion. I think Secretary Haaland is especially is interested in that. And I think she would love to see that inclusion of a diverse group of Indigenous people to come at the helm of this cause. So I will make sure that I bring that back, but I also will make sure that I share our call to action as well.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we know all good things are happening with Secretary Haaland's new position, where I think everyone here is very excited for a future with her work. And thank you, everybody, so much, all of our panelists. We really appreciate everything that you've had to say, but we are unfortunately out of time. So thank you all for being here, Niawe, and I'll pass it back to Don to introduce our next segment.
Thank you, Coral. Again, thanks to Rebecca, Chris, and Mike for that amazing presentation you made. Thanks so much. We were really pleased, and I think we learned a lot about the opportunities that are there. Next, we want to move into what we call our Youth and Climate Action section, which is will be followed up by our panel number 2, which is dealing with tribal youth internships and leadership opportunities, and actually talk to some of the folks who've gone through that. At this time, I'm really pleased to introduce my good friend, Sam Schimmel, who's Siberian Yupik and Kenite Indian from Alaska. Sam, I was going to wear my my vest like yours, and I forgot to get it. So, but amazing young man, good friend of mine. He's an avid subsistence hunter and fisherman. He's, of course, concerned with the impact climate change has on rural Alaskan communities. He serves as the Arctic Youth Ambassador, Center for Native American Youth Advisory board member. He's the vice chair of the Arctic Youth Network. Previously sat on Alaska Governor Bill Walker's Climate Action Leadership Team. He's a steering team member and youth leader for the National Tribal Climate Change Summit. He's also the recipient of the 2020 Alaska Federation of Natives Roger Lang Youth Leadership President's Award. He's studying Earth systems and political science at Stanford University. One of our great friends, he's going to talk about some upcoming events, some videos, and some climate video shorts. Turn it over to you, Sam. Thanks so much.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Don. That panel that we just came out of was really amazing. Hello, everybody. I'm Sam Schimmel. As Don said, I'm Siberian, Yupik Eskimo, and Kanaitse Indian. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the things that are upcoming. One of them is our April 6th Youth Summit. This is the third summit in the series of four rather. We started back in August with a youth storytelling video workshop that was put on. And then we moved into a September 28th Indigenous Youth Video Contest, where we received a number of videos that detailed experiences of climate change for Native youth across the country. After that, we went on to an October 6th summit on Indigenous youth and engaging in climate policy. During this summit, we had former Senator Byron Dorgan come through and talk to youth about how they can capitalize on their story in order to impact policy. We had over 40 youth attend that session, and it was a very enlightening piece where we saw how Native youth can come together to tell our stories to affect policy. After that, we had a session on February 2nd, which was on tribal or climate resiliency and how youth can play into that. We actually had Mike Derglow come on and talk about his Eagles program, as well as others. During that session, youth learned about opportunities and ways to get involved in climate action, how we could plan for our communities and different resources in that sphere. Now, upcoming later on next week, on April 6th, we have a session on tribal youth and youth empowerment, the empowerment of our young people. And that's something that we touched on today, and that is the main focus of today, which is how do we set up systems so that our youth can succeed? How do we build leadership for tomorrow that is bounded by the teachings of our elders, but spurred by the innovation of our youngness? And that's really what we're going to be focusing on, how youth can impact climate policy, how youth can set up councils and commissions that allow for our voices to be heard. One of the most important things is one, mentorship, but then two, decision-making skills. These are things that are taught through lived experience. And so in order to have that, we have a panel that's going to be had with Anthony Temez, Jordan Marie Daniels, Ermila Butler, Yanoi Logan, and Alexis Wagner on how youth what are the best practices for youth engaging in these spaces? What are some of the challenges? How can those challenges be overcome? And what is the role of coalition building in getting real and meaningful change for youth? And so if there's any young people on this call, which I'm sure there are, we ask you to join us for that April 6th session. And again, this is a more youth participatory session. So if you're interested, please sign up. And we'll put the link in the chat to where you can sign up if you're a youth. Thank you on that. So now we're going to go into one of the videos that was submitted in that September video challenge. And this is a video called Changing Deltas. And it really centers around the impacts of climate change and saltwater intrusion on the Mississippi Delta and what that means for Native peoples living there. It's a really wonderful video. And so Jennifer, would you be willing to press play on that?
The story of our delta is one of change that has built up a diverse estuary, a mosaic of coastal wetland ecosystems crossing saltwater, brackish, and freshwater environments. Our estuary is protector and provider. We gather our medicines from the forest, catch seafood from the water, and plant our gardens among the live oaks. It is the nursing ground for many different animal nations. The marshes and swamps guard us against strong winds and hurricane surges. The wetlands are the kidneys of the earth, filtering the runoff and toxins from the river before they can reach the ocean. When I look from a plane's window, I can see all the veins that feed the land and lead into the Gulf, the veins of our shared mother. I can also see how our health is failing.
Do you remember the cypress leaves that used to be 6 feet tall, 5 feet tall, as big as us standing up? Yeah, we were 5 feet tall and they were like as big as us. We were walking around and we were like, what? This is where Bigfoot used to live?
I realized when my first daughters were born that we were losing it.
The places that we have gone to hunt rabbits and deer, let's say 1 year. 5 years from now, we're pulling a net catching shrimp and fish in the same place. That's how much everything's deteriorating out there.
Those forests, I remember fishing in these forests when there were cypress trees that caught a lot of fish. Forests are popping up, dying, and no cover for the fish to be able to breed and hide and just grow big.
Land here is built through the deposition of sediments from the river. Every so often, the river switches paths for a shorter route to the Gulf of Mexico. Erosion, subsidence, and sea level rise work out of the sediment-starved land, washing away wetland habitat and creating barrier islands off the coast. In time, the river could reoccupy the area and build up the land again, continuing the delta cycle. However, this cycle has been disrupted. Levees along the Mississippi River seek to prevent its movement and seasonal flooding, which once brought freshwater nutrients to the land.
Old-growth forests in the area were largely cleared for infrastructure and real estate development.
Many of our old hunting grounds and sacred sites are now lost and lie under hundreds of tons of concrete.
Oil drilling, pipelines, and deep, straight navigation canals have made patchwork of the land and are passageways for saltwater intrusion. Skeleton trees are all that remain of freshwater forests that died in the
Oh, Jennifer, I think we lost some sound there.
transition to saltwater habitats. Continued erosion eventually leads to open waters. Culturally and ecologically valuable ecosystems are lost to the sea.
Burial mounds in Adams Bay are almost completely gone, and others along the coast are at great risk. We face dwindling access to sacred areas and subsistence activities, worsening our health as chemical and extractive industries continue to intrude into our environments and communities.
There's really no hope to stop what's dying now, but to try to stop it from dying any further, or the new growth to start growing again. To get something back like they used to have for the younger generation.
River needs to be let loose up in there. And gradually, this, where they got 20, 30 feet of water, gradually going to be just what we're looking at here. And that's going to start growing. Then we got land again.
I saw a young cypress tree alive in the middle of the skeletons in the swamp, and I was so excited. We need to reforest these areas that are trying to come back. We need to aid them and help them.
As I listen to the knowledge and stories of my elders, I dream of rebuilding living coastlines in our work towards adaptation and protection efforts. Restoration plans in Louisiana tend to value industry over the environment, and value the environment for industry.
In an indigenized future, our ecosystems would be inherently valued and protected for their beauty and biodiversity. Traditional ecological knowledge would be used to reconnect fragmented habitats through river diversions, reforestation, and marsh restoration. And the changing nature of the delta would be embraced.
It seems that even in these projects, the realities of native country, that connective issues exist. We're not immune to that reality. This changing Delta video also really touches on something that is critically important. That's traditional knowledges and the impact that climate change has on them. Our ability, where I'm from, to engage in subsistence is directly harmed by climate change. You heard about how the ecosystems in which people live in the Mississippi Delta are being directly impacted by climate change, and so are the traditional knowledges that people hold. In that vein, I guess, next month in May or June, we're going to be holding another youth session around traditional knowledges and the important role that they play in our communities, different educational programs and other pieces like that. But now we're going to transition into a stretch break, but we're going to ask you to please stay connected, as we're going to be playing a slideshow that has a list of youth training opportunities across the country, different ways for youth to get involved in programs, different opportunities for jobs, different opportunities for engagement. So if you're able to watch that, Alexis Wagner from Metlakatla was the one who was able to bring these slides together. And so we want to thank her for that. And Jerry Pardilla from the Penobscot Nation will be providing, he'll be providing some recorded music to go along with this slideshow. So please do stay connected and watch this slideshow, but if you need to stand up, we understand. So let's move to that slideshow.